Thank you one and all for tuning in to the Pause Roll and Play podcast. My name is Casey, and I am one of your hosts tonight. Hyped to have Josh and Vince here, even though this
I'm hyped to have you back.
Let's go.
Let me try that again. I'm hyped to have you back. It feels like it's been so long.
It's been a day and an age. I moved away, but I'm going to be back more frequently and getting into things. Just had to... Settling into a new home is the absolute pits. I just have to say that.
There's just so much to do.
Well, especially because we went from a smaller place to a larger place, but we had stored things away that we weren't using, and then we're like, let's pull them out. And we're like, why did we do this? So that's kind of where we're at right now. It's been great. Baby's doing well. Life is good. Glad to be back. Thank you for letting me come back to the podcast.
I mean, it's your podcast.
You're like host.
I mean, what's going on here? We got four mics and 3 people?
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. We actually saw this guy. He was kind of wandering through the local neighborhood, and we picked him up on the side of the road. So, what's up and welcome, Spider-Man!
Spider-Man
does whatever a spider can.
Hello. So we got the star, one of the stars of the movie we'll be talking about today.
This is the Andrew Garfield, right?
Yeah, it is Andrew Garfield.
I love it. It's so
So this is Andrew Garfield.
We got Andrew Garfield on the show tonight. He makes chairs for his girlfriends. He's one of the most expressive, amazing Spider-Mans there are in the whole entire Spider-Man canon and universe. And we also got Max Tell. Just a shout out to Mac because he's here with us always. But
just so you know, you're setting a precedent though. Like anytime you come on the podcast now, I'm going to expect a full costume.
I will
No
do
matter
my
the
best.
movie.
yeah. So actually, this is not some random fellow. This is Josh's brother Scott.
Yes. We've been meaning to have Scott on the podcast for a while. We've always talked about it. But
he's here.
Scott is here.
The first
with the fresh
bearded
cut.
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, they said the mustache didn't work, but
Yeah.
What do they know?
Sorry.
What do they know?
No mustaches. So this is Scott. This is your first podcast.
this is, yeah.
What the hell? I'm like sorry to say that in that way, but how have we went this long without getting your brother on the podcast?
I don't know. I mean, he's been here the whole time, but
It's all good. We have him now actually. So just really quick recap. I'm married to Josh's sister, so this also is my brother-in-law. And Scott is like one of the pinnacle people when I think about like kind of like fantasy realms involving like space and like Magic the Gathering and kind of just know-how within the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well. Like Scott knows things, so I'm hyped to have you here.
I'm really excited to be here.
wait, what were you going to say, Vince?
I don't know why you haven't been here before. I need people to nerd out with, and these guys aren't up to the task half the time.
I've been watching a lot of the most recent episodes, and I'm just like, man, I have a lot to say.
Yeah, this is your chance, man.
Well, maybe we'll have to make it more of a thing. You come on. Like you're off school for the summer, right?
For the summer, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe for the summer we pop you on a few more episodes while we have you.
Absolutely, I'll do it.
Just to kind of get things rolling for tonight. Really quick recap. One thing you've been watching recently. Let's go with Josh first.
It's mostly been Across the Spider-Verse. I am rewatching a few episodes of Black Mirror here and there just to get ready for the new season, which as we're recording this will drop on Thursday. Super excited.
That
I know,
came
right?
fast.
It's crazy. Obviously, the movie we're talking about today mostly, but then I watched Escape Room, 2019's Escape Room, about people who are put in a real life or death escape room and what goes on with it and everything. And it was mid. Like it was fine.
Mid.
Like it's an escape room thing. And like it was better than I thought it was going to be. It was just one night where I was like, I want to watch something mindless, but kind of cool. I don't know. And it popped up and I was like, I know this isn't going to be great, but I'm going to put it on. I give it like 3 stars on Letterboxd, which isn't bad.
Is it a horror or more of a?
It's like a thriller,
Yeah,
more
okay.
so. Like they incorporate some horror elements into it, but just do it, Scott.
Here's the thing: just getting this open
With the latex.
in the suit, not a good time.
Spider-Man usually is soda free. He only goes by bottles.
So that and New Girl, getting my fill
your
of,
way through it.
Chica
fill of
Nueva?
Jake Johnson. So
I saw The Flash. I got tickets
Sorry.
a pre-screening.
I already like know what you're
Yeah.
kind of
I love
gonna
how
say,
we all
but
kind of looked at you like
What? Yeah, because it hasn't come out as of this recording. They're doing a lot of pre-screenings all over the place, and I follow this comic book shop down the street on Facebook, and randomly I just signed in, and they were like, do you want to go to a free screening? Sign up here. And so I did it and showed up. Really good experience. I thought I wasn't gonna get into the theater at first because it was like a first come first serve. They overbooked it. It was a pre-screening for press, and they wanted to fill the whole theater up because they didn't just want like 2 people in there or whatever, So I showed up later than I wanted to. Didn't know if I was gonna get into the theater or not. They ended up having 1 seat in the nice like fancy luxury chairs, so I got a legit seat. It was great. The situation was all good, guys. It's a pretty mid movie.
I was about to be like, this was not what you told me. The way you said that,
Guys,
You set that up so perfectly. For like, and it was a great thing, but
can you give us like spoiler-free reasons why it's pretty mid?
So I'm, to start off with, not a big Ezra Miller fan.
Okay.
So it's kind of the same issue I had with the new Fast and Furious movie, where it had too much of the main character in it for me. Like Vin Diesel, I didn't love Vin Diesel in the new Fast X movie. There was too much of him. I kind of felt the same way about this one. I'm not a big fan of Ezra Miller. There was high expectations going in, the way that they're marketing it, and I think it's 100% just to get people to go into it, because it's not bad. It's actually probably one of the better DC movies, but that's not saying a lot. You know what I mean? Banks very heavily on nostalgia with the Michael Keaton thing, which, again, I'm not like the super fan of Michael Keaton, so that was kind of like whatever. This is
the
fine.
reveal happens, and you're like, oh,
yeah, and it's so marketed towards him that it's not really a reveal to begin with. You're kind of watching the whole movie, just kind of waiting for him to show up, And then it all kind of devolves into the third act CGI punch them up, just like every other superhero movie does.
They keep releasing so many clips on Twitter from what I assume is that third act battle where there's kind of like in a desert or something like that, and it just seems so lifeless.
It is. That's exactly what I thought. It was just this empty desert, and I'm just like, this isn't really visually interesting at all. It's just a big CGI empty desert, and I feel like it's still so reactionary after the Man of Steel came out, and everybody freaked out about the amount of people that would have died in Man of Steel, and I feel like DC and everyone is still kind of like
really
scared to do anything because of the backlash half of that, which is just kind of sad to me.
So they fight in a desert.
Yeah, and it's pulling from one of the best, like, where it all started, and so it's like a callback to this big thing that you love, and it's just not quite done as well. You know what I mean? It was good. It was fine. There's a lot of heart to it, which is really nice. There is a lot of character focus for the Flash himself, which I really liked, but the overdependence on not great special effects just doesn't do it for me anymore. I just feel like most of these superhero movies I've kind of seen already. And I've seen Flashpoint, the cartoon. I haven't read the novel, but I honestly would just kind of rather watch the cartoon over again than see this one again. I don't know. Check it out. I'd love to have a broader discussion about the multiverse with you guys, especially after watching this one. And then The Flash is all about the multiverse too, and Marvel is like really deep into the multiverse right now. So eventually we need to have like a, what do we actually want from the multiverse, and is the multiverse delivering conversation?
If there's a bagel.
I'm just mostly feeling like it's the multiverse of sadness these days, to be honest with you. Like, that's how I feel.
That's a good one, Case.
I don't know what to say. That's how I feel about it. It's just kind of like,
Yeah,
Another
and maybe
movie.
this is a conversation that we'll get into with Across the Spider-Verse because of how well they did the multiverse in this one. So we'll see how this conversation goes, and if not, then maybe after The Flash comes out and we've all seen it, we can kind of compare and contrast like who's doing it good, who's kind of just doing multiverse for nostalgia's sake to bit butts in theaters, and who's actually like using the multiverse in an interesting way instead of a marketing way, if that makes sense.
Excuse.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you
Because
think
that's what I felt like Keaton was in this. It wasn't they could have used any multiverse Batman, but they needed someone to put butts in seats. So they're like, we have to have Michael Keaton come in because no one's going to show up if we don't.
we should have got nipple suit Batman?
That would be something.
Is that Clooney?
That's Clooney's Batman.
I think Kilmer might have had. No, was it just... No, you're right.
I don't remember.
I think it was
Clooney did.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just kind of like, that was always funny to me, was the nipple suit Batman. I don't know. Really quickly, though, Scott, what you been watching lately?
Scott, you can say whatever you want, but I would love to hear, because originally we talked about having you on to talk about the D&D movie, and I know that you saw that. If you can talk about whatever you want, but if you want to mention
that is true. I mean, that is most of the content that I've been watching recently is D&D content. It's because, the D&D movie that just came out, a while back, I just watched it with Dad and with Mikey. And so we just watched that, just the other day. And I've also have literally just been watching one of the D&D like actual plays. I think their last episode of their current season comes out, on Tuesday or something.
Was that what you posted on Be Real the other night?
Yeah, no, that was what I was watching on Be Real.
Cool.
Yeah. Because that campaign it's essentially Game of Thrones meets Candyland.
I love.
And they're doing a prequel series of it because they'd already done their main campaign of that one, but they're doing a prequel series that is being DM'd by Critical Role's Matt Mercer. And so they brought in this huge guy to do this, and so it's been, that one's been really good. But the D&D movie was fantastic when it comes to like Dungeons and Dragons and just kind of like that world and both the comedy of it, as well as just like representing like all of the different D&D classes and kind of characters
like
and
the
things.
actual lore behind everything.
Yeah, a lot of the lore and different things, and just that you could see like that some people were thinking that they were going to take it in a comedic route, where it was like, oh yeah, it's a bunch of people playing around a table and like take that little meta aspect of it, but that it was actual just lore and stuff in the universe. But you could still kind of see that aspect around, oh, this is a bard that is being played, in this specific way, that you could see how it was, but that it was just that intense aspect of the story still.
Because they
Did they announce a sequel?
Not that I know of. I mean, I wouldn't say that they're not going to do it, but I don't think there's anything official.
Okay.
What have you been watching?
Really quickly, what I've been watching is a whole lot of RuPaul's Drag Race, to be honest with you.
I've been seeing it on Allie's Be Reals and everywhere.
Yeah, we've been watching a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race. It's Pride Month when we're recording this, and so my wife, being the queer person that she is, she's like, let's watch RuPaul's. So I've been watching a lot of that, which now goes into a story about my time in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And so we were out, we had dinner at this place, and we walked down the street, and we weren't kind of finished, ready to go back yet. And we stumbled into a drag bar, and we watched a local drag show in Edmonton, Canada. And I was like, wow. So that's my history with drag, for one. I've never been to a drag show before that.
Dude, it's getting real popular up in Salt Lake.
It's an entertainment thing, right? It's just go, have fun, enjoy yourself. Maybe learn something new about people different than you. But like the entertainment value.
And I hear the food is really good too.
Yeah, I've not been to a drag brunch. I've only been to a drag bar at night. So those might be different things. But what I understand is like I learn something new every time. And like through RuPaul's Drag Race, I've also learned a lot about kind of queer culture that I didn't understand, which is really cool. And then finally, the last thing I've been watching is still the guy building the cabin in the Italian Alps.
Yes.
He's still building the cabin? Or
Well,
you
he's
finished
still fixing it. He's still fixing it up. What he's been doing is he dug around the side of the cabin and is insulating the sides so the water can't run into it. Very cool stuff, like very exciting, especially like as my wife and I are kind of redoing and rebuilding kind of the space that we're living in now. It's kind of like, holy cow, I understand how to do this a little bit because of what this guy did, so it's kind of fun. But yeah, that's what I've been watching. Nothing too crazy. I did, however, restart Battle Angel Alita again because of rumors of the sequel coming out and how badly I want it to exist. So I've still thought about just turning it on and just watching it like 400 times to make sure they know someone out there wants to watch it.
Casey's just making sure they know. People are
They
still
make it
watching
for
it
me.
today.
It's just like the World of Warcraft movie. I want a sequel to that. And everyone else is like, no. And I'm like, freak, if it's made for the Chinese market, I'll go to that market and go watch it. Like, I don't even care.
They got Transformers for that now.
No more Transformers.
You
No!
see it? It's killing it in the theater.
It's killing in the box office at
Yeah,
least.
yeah.
It
Well, that's what I
overtook
mean, box office.
it overtook Across the Spider-Verse in the second weekend. I mean, like,
And
Spider-Verse made more the first weekend than Transformers did, but I thought that Spider-Verse would still be above it this weekend, but it wasn't. And I was originally, because I went and saw Spider-Verse again a second time, I wanted to see it in IMAX again. They pulled all the IMAX
I know, me
screenings
too. I was
for
pissed.
Transformers. I was like, dang.
And it's actually, Transformers is actually getting decent word of mouth. Like, not great, but
It's, like,
everyone's like,
decent.
this isn't as bad as the other
Not
ones.
as bad as the most recent
The last
ones.
one was like Swords and Knights, right? Was the one before this one?
I don't know.
They just destroyed the franchise, in my opinion, right? In my opinion is
But
not.
then they had Bumblebee to bounce back.
Okay,
you know.
Bumblebee was
Bumblebee,
fine.
okay. Did we do Bumblebee on the podcast?
We did.
I want to feel.
I think we did do a Bumblebee episode.
If not, I know we at least saw it.
We at least
Yeah.
talk about it.
It's one of the last ones. So,
Yeah.
anyways,
Well, sorry guys, I have a time crunch, so I'm actually going to be bailing here in a second. But I want to hurry and do the spoiler-free review with you guys, if that's okay. Because
Yeah, definitely.
got to go be a dad, but I wanted to be here for this part of it. So first off, as we all know, we're talking about Across the Spider-Verse. Sorry, I was going to butcher it and be like into the multiverse, which is wrong. But we're talking about this, which is a beautiful animated film. The original film was released, I believe, in 2018.
Yeah, 2018.
And it was good, but it wasn't quite as big of a hit, if I remember right, until it went into streaming. Is that correct?
It was kind of just like a slower, it kind of took its time to get word of mouth to people.
Okay.
Like it released and people were like, wow, this is really good. And it kind of just like people had to tell other people like, dude, this movie is actually really good. You need to go see it. And so it did definitely keep hitting its stride when it hit streaming, but it was kind of like, it wasn't like slow at first, but it definitely wasn't like this. I think I saw a stat that said that the opening weekend of Across the Spider-Verse versus the original one was something like triple or quadruple.
Yeah, like
Wow.
it was pretty low though. If I don't know, but essentially it made lots more. But I didn't watch it actually until we were home during the pandemic, if I remember right. And so that was the first time I saw it, and I hadn't even really thought about it much, if I remember right. So, and coming into this one, I was really excited for kind of like the same kind of feeling about it. It's kind of where I'm at. It's kind of like the overall aesthetic experiences you kind of go into it, and kind of all the animation styles. And that was what really was like when we were like, let's do this. And I was like, okay, I can do this one because of that.
So we talked a lot about, I nerded out a lot on the last episode about how beautiful the Gwen Stacy comics were. Now, do you guys understand what I was talking about?
Oh my gosh.
Like, okay, so first off, we're doing non-spoiler.
We're doing spoiler
right?
free, right?
Yeah, okay. So I love this movie. I'll preface it with that. Like, this is not a new take. I have not talked to anybody or listened to anything who have not said this movie is amazing. It's amazing. It's a great, beautiful movie. But man, I love the way that they have the different art styles in this movie. How they jump around to depending on the character, and just like you get sucked into their world. And the Gwen Stacy art style is just exactly the aesthetic that I like crave. Every one of the scenes with her is just like a work of art. It's beautiful. It's watercolor and it's amazing and I love it. And this movie's just incredible.
The art style, I feel like this one had so much more. I agree with what you said, that I love this movie and I think it's incredible. And I feel like they just had so much more creative freedom, because the first one really did something so new, and you knew that they really had to give the people so much artistic liberty to be able to do that first one. But I feel like then they saw what happened with the first one, what people loved about it, and they said, take that to the next level. And I feel like they did, because before you kind of saw, you got quick little stories of the Spider-Man where you got to see them in their Spider-Verse, in the noir universe or the anime universe and stuff like that. And then just them coming into Miles's world, right, in the first one. Whereas in this one, so many different times we got to actually go into the universe. So it wasn't just the character being animated a certain way. It was everyone else being in this Spider-Person's world, right? In Moonben. How is it you say it?
Moonbatten.
Moonbatten. Sorry. Like that one. Or Gwen Stacy's world, which we'll talk about more later, but is my personal favorite as far as the art style goes. And so there's just so much more creative freedom. I feel like it's so hard to like pick a favorite between like the two movies, and I'm not going to necessarily do that. But it's just that if you love the first one, you'll love the second one. And there's so much that went into it artistically, voice acting, story wise. I feel like there's so much that there is going for this movie that like even the smallest, tiniest critiques are just like, I don't care about them.
I like this movie. I thought it was good. Truthfully, I did not see the whole thing, so that's why I'm only doing the spoiler-free part with
Sleepy?
you. Yeah, I don't know how tired I look right now, but yeah, like baby calls, and that's just kind of how it's been, and so we've had to do a lot of things. But from what I saw of it and what I enjoyed about
Wait, did you fall asleep during it then or what?
I had to leave.
Yeah,
So,
left in the middle of it.
yeah.
Okay.
But
Bummer.
yeah, being a dad sometimes can be challenging. That's all I have to say. But what I enjoyed about it really quickly is it just takes you. And it was fun to be in an animated film that like I was invested in enough that I wanted to see again, and that I'm like excited to go finish, right? Because I don't know if you've been in those films where if you have to turn it off or whatever and you don't get back to it, like I just want to go watch it now. Like that's kind of my thing. So that was for me. I really enjoyed the animation style of, can I give a couple of them? Like Gwen Stacy's one was really cool. I like the colorways. I also really liked, there was kind of like some old school comic style type that kind of pops in there for a minute, which I think is really rad. And then on top of that, also just the general Miles Morales vibe of kind of the artwork. They kind of kept the same thing, but they made it a little bit better, in my opinion. But I don't know, maybe not everyone feels that way, and who knows.
I think everyone feels that way.
But Scott, I'm going to dip out, and I apologize for your section. I just have
you're
kind of
good.
a time thing. But guys, thank you so much for letting me jump back in
Yeah,
with you
it's
on a
good to
short
see you,
time. I will be back again. Everyone, love you.
Okay. I mean, we've talked a lot about like the art style, and I think a lot of the different arts, the different art styles and things that we had was incredible. But my kind of like day to day, I use music a ton. The soundtrack for this movie was incredible. I just the different themes that we had, the different, every individual character a lot of the time had their own specific theme. There's a lot of times where like you see multiple characters together where the music gets to blend in those themes, blends in, but then also their art styles as well. And we get to see just, how these different universes are interacting and different stuff like that all across, the entire kind of show. But just, being able to hear that, musically while also seeing it visually was just something that like really kind of, blew me away. I mean, at the very, very end, not going to say it, but just that was one of my favorite scenes, was that end sequence, kind of just that blending and everything like that.
They used it very efficiently. But I don't think there was any needle drop in here that stood out to me as much as like the Biggie one that did in the first one.
Because here's the thing, all right? Obviously, like, the first one is very big and very like recognizable with Sunflower and everything that happens in it. And I had another friend, so Cade, who was on our Into the Spider-Verse episode. He also mentioned that he felt like the soundtrack and the score and the soundtrack with the song specifically weren't as strong in this one.
The score, I think, was especially strong. The score for me was stronger than the needle drops in this one, in Across.
I think I might be the only one then who feels the opposite, because I did love the first. I feel like they're both really strong. Like, it's kind of like picking your favorite child. It's not really like there's not really one that's super strong over the other ones. But Metro Boomin, they collabed with a ton of different artists on a few different songs for this one, and I felt like there were just a few different moments because maybe they weren't as strong, but it was like almost a mix between score and like a needle drop song. The moment. This is in the trailer, so it's not spoiler, but the moment where you have Miles and Gwen and they're upside down in the bell tower or the bank building, right? That moment where you have Metro Boomin and just moments like that, I felt like there were more of them, and I felt like they were throughout the movie. And I kind of dig that like lo-fi vibe a little more. So maybe that's why I kind of liked it a little bit more in this one, the songs that came out, but that might just be kind of me.
All right, let's spoil this thing.
Spoilers. Okay, well, if we're doing spoilers right away, let's talk about the end for a couple of different reasons. One, plot twist and setting up the third one.
Going right.
But two, talking about what Scott mentioned, which I hadn't noticed until I was watching a YouTube video with you before we came over here, actually, about that music that's building up at the end and everything. Is Gwen, there's more to it, but it's Gwen Stacy's drum solo and song from the beginning, and I hadn't gotten it. And what this YouTube video also pointed out and mentioned that I hadn't noticed on either of my watches is her speech that she gives at the end, the speech that she gives at the beginning with the drum solo and everything. You don't realize it when you're first watching it, but that is actually her pitch that she's giving to the other spider people as she's going around recruiting them. Because if you listen to the lines of it, she's basically, it shows, and she kind of talks about vaguely, but like things that happen throughout the movie. But if you go back and you listen to the lyrics, and we watched the YouTube video, and I was like, whoa, what the? It's what she says is talking and recruiting, what she would say in like a recruitment speech to these other spider people.
I did notice she was talking. She was saying things, yeah, exactly, like speaking in like we and you or whatever. Like it wasn't to a specific person or something.
Well, and it's also it's a really good parallel to the first one where, you get Miles Morales and like, oh, we're going to do things differently. And she's like, all right, let's do things differently this time. And then she speaks from a third person telling the Miles Morales story. That's also part of it. And so it's like, it parallels the first one, but in the third person way. And then also later on finding out that's what she was using when she was going to talk to the other spiders.
So what a perfect way to suck me into a movie than to drop me into the Gwen Stacy world right from the beginning. Like I said, right from the get-go, like I love Gwen.
Like I said, my favorite.
I love Spider-Gwen. I love her world. I did not expect the first, 15 minutes to be all about her and her backstory and actually see it all play out.
No one did.
Yeah, like I've listened to a couple of things, and some people were kind of like, I kind of just wanted to get into Miles's story, like get back to my boy or whatever. And I'm like, no,
We'll get to him, man.
I was like, there could not have been a better way to start this movie. Like, drop me into Gwen's world. Let me see this beautiful art style. Let me spend time with one of my favorite spider characters that has been created, and then mix in this multiverse Vulture, which I didn't expect at all, like to already start to incorporate this Vulture and make him such a unique version of the Vulture with that parchment style and that old, like, what is that?
Like
Van
Van
Gogh
but like,
style weaponry.
Yeah.
Like, I loved it.
Not
I
Van
loved
Gogh.
how they have her kind of be, like you said, the bookend, not only the bookend, but the intro and the bookend to the story. Where this is still Miles' story, but the last one very much was so focused on him, and everyone was kind of like side characters within his story. And this one just did such a good job of like we said, expanding the world, expanding the characters, and making this more than just a Miles Morales story, making this more of it's a Gwen story, and it's a Miguel O'Hara story. And, the only thing that I felt like was missing, I can't even say I felt like it was missing. I didn't realize it was missing until he showed up, was Peter B. Parker showing up halfway through the movie.
You're like, yeah.
Yeah, it was so good, and the movie was just like so enthralling with all these characters that I forgot he was missing halfway through the movie until you hear his voice. I'm like, I forgot he was going to be in this. Yes!
We hadn't even gotten there yet. Yes.
So I guess that's my first question for you guys is like, did you have a favorite Spidey, and how did you like the way that they were used? Like, is there one specific that stood out to you guys, and not only like the Spider-Man himself, but also their animation style and the music they used for him and all that kind of stuff?
Did you have one?
Yeah, I mean, I'll
Don't take mine.
I love Hobie.
Dang it, that's mine.
Dude, Hobie
Daniel
Brown.
Kaluuya, by the way.
So
Yeah,
good.
fun
Mermaids.
surprise there too.
But just having that, if I remember correctly, that the art style of Hobie Brown was one of the longest parts that they were doing. Like when they were animating specifically his character, it took a lot longer than a lot of the other ones, if I remember correct.
He's basically 2D, and he switches. And a lot of people talk about online, there's like all these things, he switches because he's non-conforming, and there's different things like that. And he switches, and I can't remember exactly why at this moment, but I also remember that it was super cool. He switches between color and black and white at different times because of something that goes along with the story.
There's some different like metaphors and different things, but just because when he first comes in, it's kind of the vibe of like a lot of people have kind of been talking about, like when he first comes in, it's like, are we supposed to like this guy?
Spider Punk.
Because
he's Gwen's boyfriend. And you're
Right,
voting for
yeah, he
Miles.
comes in and it's like, oh, this is the dude that Gwen's been like, maybe.
time with.
Hey, don't even
spend time
baby. Her clothes and her toothbrush was at his place.
This is a big debate online, but
Whether or not they were dating.
whether or not they were dating or anything like that, but he comes in and we're like, okay, are we supposed to like this guy? He's kind of like this super arrogant kind of thing, but then as the story kind of progresses, it's like that's the only dude who stood with Miles and was like trying to help him that whole time, and he's hyping Miles up, right after the fight in Mumbattan. He's like, oh, Miles, my guy, just hyping him up. But we also see in his color palette, like his color palette changes to pink, I think, every time he's like right around Miles or is like anything like that. And it's just like, we see pink as like that, like happiness or different things. And it's like we see that directly anytime he's with Miles. It changes to that specifically.
They didn't confirm this specifically because people don't have like the actual like film yet, and I don't think anyone said anything about it. But we talked about in the last one, right? The whole before when Miles wasn't into the Spider-Verse, when he wasn't fully himself yet, he was animated in 12 frames per second when everyone else was in 24, and then by the end he gets into that full fluid 24 frames per second. They're saying that he's in like Force, which is like 6 frames per second or something like that, but it's purposeful, right? He doesn't want to fit in. He wants to be non-conforming and do his own thing and all of this other stuff. And because of just like that sly whatever attitude in the YouTube video we watched again, I kind of noticed where I hadn't noticed before. It just seems like he's always like kind of playing with something or doing something. As he's talking, when Miguel's doing the whole intro or whatever, he's slowly taking stuff,
Stealing things
from the things, which he then later uses to build the watch that Gwen uses to be able to travel and have her own watch or everything, right? And so it's just like, he's such this sly character, and Daniel Kaluuya does such an incredible job, and I love anything that he does pretty much. And so I would definitely say Hobie as well would probably be my favorite. If I had to give like a secondary one, a silver medal, I do love how they use Miguel O'Hara and Spider-Man 20. Oscar Isaac does an incredible job. Dude, what a freaking all-star cast. Not even just the people who they brought back, but the new additions. We'll talk more about, Spider-Man 2099 and what he does. And so I would put him there, but bronze medal, or just like an honorable mention, because you have to throw him in there. I'm gonna like mess it up now that is it Ben Reilly? Is it what Reilly? Is it?
Ben
Andy Samberg.
my perfect contraction muscles.
Exactly. And he's just
pose.
I was just thinking about my trauma.
And Andy Samberg just like doing that like so seriously but hilariously at the same time was like one of those the first time I watched it, I listened to it and I was like, oh, like I know who that is, but I didn't recognize it immediately. In the second that the movie was over, that was the first thing I looked up, like on Letterboxd, like who is this? Andy Samberg. I was like, duh, yes. And then watching it the second time, I was like, yes.
But yeah, I don't know much about Ben Reilly, like at all.
He was telling me about this.
Tragic. Ben Reilly's.
We got to keep this fairly chill.
Ben Reilly's
a big comic book reader.
I'm not as much of a comic book reader, but like just kind of random bits and pieces.
Okay.
Keeping up on the lore.
I remember correctly, he is the cause of either Mary Jane or Gwen's death, just because of his innate radioactive self. There's more details that go specifically into it, but he is the cause of her death. He poisons her essentially, and is the cause of her death. If I'm remembering correctly, that it's that Spider-Man that is.
Isn't he like a clone or something of Peter too?
Yeah.
On top of it.
They mentioned that in the.
See, this is what I love the most about the multiverse.
So much
And this is gonna be this. We don't have to go into this direction because there's a lot of spiders to talk about. But this is what I love the most about what they're doing with their multiverse in this one is they are expanding and showing these characters. Like Miles is the perfect example of this. They introduced Miles in a way that he is mainstream culture now, to the point where they just announced a live action movie with Miles coming up. Like, this is how you do a multiverse. You introduce new characters that are interesting. Maybe it's not going to get butts in the seats immediately, but if you look at it from like a business standpoint, how many of these characters that they introduced in this movie itself would you love to see a solo flick?
Yeah.
Like live action, cartoon, whatever. I don't want to see more Michael Keaton. I've seen it already. But I want to see a Hobie Brown movie. I want to see a Gwen Stacy movie. I would actually like to see a Ben Reilly movie. I think that would be hilarious to watch.
I want to see the Donald Glover Prowler movie.
Yes. I mean, well,
I don't even care if there's a Spider-Man in it. I just want him.
but that's also one of the coolest things is like Donald Glover is the kind of the stepping off point for the creation of Miles Morales.
For at least into the movies and TV, right?
Yeah,
because he was around in the comics for a while, but he just never.
I'm trying to remember like what like that whole thing was, because if I remember correctly, it was like 2010 with like Community when that whole thing came out, and there was like the big like Donald Glover for Spider-Man campaign or whatever that happened, and then like I don't remember the exact things, but I saw this thing on TikTok that was kind of going over everything that happened with Donald Glover and the creation of Miles Morales, at least, more mainstream, or if it was the actual creation of Miles Morales.
This is my one nitpick of the movie, though, since we're going into the Glover stuff already. I kind of wish this movie would just do its own thing. I think the multiverse is getting a little too into itself, where even the Sony animated movies is a part of the Marvel universe somehow now, like to the point where they reference like, oh, that Doctor Strange and the 29999, it's like, it's a fun thing. But when they're jumping into like the Venomverse and then they jump over into Donald Glover, and I'm just kind of like, can't we just like contain this a little bit? Like, let the Into the Spider-Verse be its own thing, make the perfect trilogy, and let's not be bogged down by all these other like live action things or consequences from other movies. I bumped up against that a little bit in the movie. I had a great time seeing Donald Glover as a Prowler because they hinted that in the Marvel movie so long ago. I just don't know if this was like the place that I actually wanted to see it cameoed. I don't know. I just bump up
it
with
makes
this
sense.
multiverse stuff a little bit lately, where I'm just kind of like, am I burnt out in the multiverse already before it really even started?
And it makes sense, like, from that point of view. Well, I was just thinking about it just, like, as that moment itself, just like it's like a little mini Easter egg, and seeing how, like, flawlessly it was put in there.
Perfectly.
Because it felt so weird because, yeah, you're used to having one art style directly next to another art style with these movies. It's been happening since the beginning. But just having them be in the animated Nueva York 2099 Spider-Verse place, and Donald Glover's sitting in a freaking cage dressed as the Prowler, and it just looked normal.
Yeah,
it
you
looked
just buy
fine.
it
And I was like, what is happening right now? Like, how does this look fine to me, or what's going on? It did kind of like feel itself too much looking at everything, and they had to do like, they didn't do anything other than like just mentioning it. They didn't show any clips of Tom Holland, but they had clips of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire and these different things. And so it was interesting to think about and go through. I kind of like all the little Easter eggs, but it does kind of make the future like a little bit questionable.
They used it, in my opinion, just the right amount. If they would have pushed it a little bit harder, I think I would have been
too
bugged.
far.
But if it's just like, oh yeah, let's just mention it and move on, I'm like, okay, cool. You know,
And I
you're
feel
not like leaning into like the look at this thing. You have to come see this movie because this guy's in it for a minute, you know, kind of a thing.
Yeah. And I feel like we set up the third and final movie of this trilogy to hopefully not leave the multiverse, but it seems like there's obviously like a really direct conflict that's ready to be resolved. And this movie was very Easter eggy with so many Spider-Men, and there still will be stuff like that in the third movie. There has to be to make it, you know, a Spider-Verse movie. But I feel like the story is very, not like given to us, but it's like very direct where it needs to go. It's going to be character focused and everything with Miles G. Morales, I think is the name that they gave to the one that's the Prowler, and how that's going to go. And so I feel like the Spider-Verse and the multiverse will still be part of it, but I feel like it'll be a lot more character driven and focus on that. And so I like the way they set it up. I like that they used it and did so many Easter eggs. And like we were watching this YouTube video I talked about earlier, just talking about all the Easter eggs and stuff like that. We eventually, because of time constraints, were like, we got to skip some of this video. And what we ended up skipping was we were about halfway through the spider fight where all the spiders are, you know, chasing him. Every single, you know, spider that's in it's like, you can't, there's so many references and they all have purpose. Like a diploma on a wall with someone's name is like, what was it? It was Ditko or something, one of the original creators or producers or something like that. And so every single shot has purpose and everything is just so deep. And
It's almost a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like
I saw a lot of people use the word
overwhelming.
overwhelming to talk about. I think one of the top, I have Letterboxd right here with my review with a couple things I was going to talk about. But if I click on Across the Spider-Verse, I'm pretty sure the top liked review of it, it's a 5-star review, but the person says one of the most overwhelming viewing experiences of my life, compounded by my, oh, I'm not going to read that part. Sorry. I was like, I should have read this before, but that is a word I've heard, and some people say that it's like overwhelming good, and I think that it is, but I can understand how it could be overwhelming, like a little bit much for people. But I loved it. There's just so much different stuff to do.
It makes it so you can see the movie, you can watch the movie in different ways. Like you watch the movie in the theater without a remote control that you can pause it. You're gonna try. I was trying so hard, you know, to look around and see all the Easter eggs, to try to read the little pop-up bubbles that come up. You know, impossible without a controller to pause it, you know? So you have your main experience where you can just watch it as this one cohesive fluid thing, you know, and enjoy the movie for what it is, enjoy everybody's character arcs. And then there's a whole nother way to watch this movie when it comes out on VOD that you're going to be able to pause and read everything and like focus on these characters and see all these things that you never noticed before. And it's just, it's
so many little text things giving you context that you couldn't read every single time.
So I think it is overwhelming, but like she said, overwhelming or like you said, overwhelming in a good way where I'm like, I think I want all those things there. And just because I can't see it all, taking it in all of it up front doesn't mean, I mean, it just begs for a repeat viewing, you know, over and over again. It gives you a reason to go back and kind of watch these things over and over again.
Exactly. There's so many different animation styles in this one, and we've kind of talked a lot about different Spider-Man, which ones we like in different universes. And I have to obviously touch again on Gwen Stacy's universe because it was my favorite both times they used it. This is one of the examples when I was talking about the non-spoiler review of them giving them even more creative liberty, right? Because we talked about seeing Spider-Gwen and other people in Miles's universe, but now we go all the way into Gwen Stacy's universe, this beautiful pastel watercolor universe that's so highly affected by emotion. Like not in any kind of like an actual way. Like, I'm not saying that like if you were actually there in that universe, this would happen, but in portraying it to us, so much of it, at first I was like, wait, her hair is this color, her hair is this color, and it's just depending where she is, the lighting, and her emotions, how she feels. All of these moments are so incredible. I'm thinking of a few moments specifically. In the first sequence from the first set of the movie, when, you know, she goes into her room and she's all sad and it's dark, and her dad comes in and she gives him the hug, and that burst of pink and from the dark blue that it was, that just kind of lights up the whole room, and it makes you feel, oh my goodness, like that's crazy. When you see her the darker, when after her father leaves to, you know, try and get her and everything like that, and it fades to the darker and her hair looks more green because she's back into that darker state. And then later on in the movie when she comes back and she talks to her father and they have that such emotional conversation, and the world like disappears around them almost. You catch little glimpses of it here, but it just turns into these close-up shots and more abstract background done in the watercolors just to focus solely on the characters. And you still catch the little glimpses that they're in this room, but the movie gives itself to the scene in a way that you can't like hardly do. You can try in a live action with like CGI backgrounds and stuff to just be able to focus on characters or have them be in a super simplistic set. But this really gives itself to the art style of that world and to these two characters having this moment. Their face, their hair, everything changes, the background, the water bleeds down in the watercolors. And that was actually the other moment that I forgot about when she first reveals herself to her dad in the first one, and you see the watercolor start to bleed behind either one of them, just kind of having the world collapse around them.
So cool.
There's, like I said, there's so many different art styles we can talk about in this one, but Spider-Gwen's world literally had me, like emotional. Like, it was incredible to be able to watch this. And so I have a couple other animation things I want to talk about, but are there other Spider worlds or even this one that you guys wanted to mention more about?
Well, even with Spider-Gwen, when she's in like Miles's world, you can also see her effect on his world as well. When they're swinging through, you know, and he's kind of trying to show off or whatever, you know, she's essentially just kind of affecting the world. You can see kind of the color coming off of her and how it's affecting Miles and all of these different times where it's like, you know, we know his universe and we kind of know how it's perceived, but then as she swings through, you know, we get to see kind of that.
There's like flashes and fades of pink and stuff as she goes through it.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have Gwen's that's so colorful and beautiful and emotional, and then you have the Spot. And the Spot's universe starts out as just like this clumsy, you know, weird looking thing. But I love the way he degresses from going from kind of, I mean, he's always black and white, but as he becomes more and more powerful and more evil, they start to draw it like a child would draw a monster.
Like a chalk.
Yeah, like a Slender Man or something, where it's just like squiggles and circles.
And the frames are brought down, and it's just very...
And then it goes from like white and black to like a black and white, just inverse, just like horror, like a child's horror, a child's imagination of a horror story, you know, kind of being projected into this thing. I loved the way that looked. He's just like getting creepier and creepier as it goes on, and chaotic and just like dark and eerie, and it's just the complete opposite of anything you see with Gwen. I can't wait to see more of that kind of stuff, because it had the same effect that Gwen stuff had on you emotionally, where it's just like I started getting scared of this character that starts out so silly, so bumbly, so just a joke. Of a villain of the week, you know.
I mean, Jason Schwartzman, right?
Yeah. Hilarious. And then by the end, I'm legitimately scared of what this character is and what he's become and what he's going to be able to do in the next one. I think I can't wait to see what they do with him in the follow-up here.
Yeah. No, and I think please. Cutting like when we cut, you know, in the scene where he finally is able to kind of, you know, turn into that, and we see that like cut of the future where it is just that pencil drawing, just minimal details. We see, you know, Captain Singh and his dad and everything like that. And we just see that, flash forward where it's, everything that's going to happen. And it's just terrifying because we don't know, what's kind of going on. The flashes in between the two universes. And then we see what happens in that next scene. And we're like, oh, so this is what's coming.
Yeah. There's so many little details. And I'm sure we'll keep on bringing up animation as the podcast goes because it steals the show of this movie, right? There's so many good things about this movie that we're going to talk about that have to do with stuff other than the animation, but the animation is what sets this movie really apart from other animated movies and from other movies in general, because you can't do this in a live action movie. It has to be animated. Like CGI you can try, but it's just a different level. And their attention to detail with the animation is one of the things that gets me. So this isn't necessarily about a world, but just detail with the animation that they do when they're on the train that goes miles into heaven or wherever that train is going, because it's on there. They're on there for forever. I don't know where these people live. I don't know what they're doing, but they're on that train for the long haul up to wherever. When they're on that train, the train passes through these rings as it's ascending to wherever it's going. And I called them the animation rings because I didn't know what else to call them. The attention to detail in this movie is so crazy that while you have all of these different Spider-Men who are in the different Spider-Verses and they're still in their own animation style, but within Miguel O'Hara's Nueva York world, that's already enough as it is, right? That's crazy. But as this train is going by and as they pass each one of these rings, you could think it would act as like a shadow. Whenever that ring passes over for a few, for a frame or two or something like that, the animation of all these characters swap briefly every single time one of these rings passes, which is why I called it like an animation ring, is that they're there and you can see it. And it's not even just showing it, hey, to be cool, because like I said, it's only a couple frames that it happens each time, but it happens multiple times where you see the characters and they change and they have different faces. And it shows, we saw in one of the videos we watched, because it broke down frame by frame, when Spider-Man 2099 goes to chase him at one point, and we talked a lot about how he's he's a little bit more on the technological side and not as much the webs. He's very much kind of slashing and cutting into things like that. And he's chasing him. And in 3 frames, it's the regular him. And then one of those animation rings passes. And then it's a yellow version of him. And then it's an orange version of him. And each one of those was a different suit from the comics and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
But just in frames as it's going past. And it is absolutely crazy, the attention to detail that happens just in those quick moments. And it happens with all the Spider-Man. Stuff like that happens, and maybe not all of them might be as detailed as that, where it's a different suit every single time it goes past. But that's just mind-blowing. The amount of effort and the amount of time that they took to put into something as little as a couple frames that you won't see unless it's cut down shot by shot. But you just see that something is different happening as they're going by. And it's just so mind-blowing. And I am, like you said, ready for a 4-hour session of me watching this movie, because I'm pausing it and looking at all of the different details that happen as it goes along.
I think with kind of that, my favorite thing that I saw someone analyze frame by frame is during that fight, Miguel, calls him an anomaly, and he glitches immediately afterwards. People went through and paused that glitch, and in the glitch, he switches back to into the Spider-Verse, his suit with the eyes cut out. And the really baggy kind of
sweatshirty.
That sweatshirt, yeah. Where it's that inconsistency where, he's being called out for, not being a Spider-Man, just being called an anomaly, that he doesn't deserve the power or whatever it was. But that he temporarily switches into that mindset, but that's what the glitch shows, is that doubt kind of thing. And it's just so cool.
I want to get to some of these characters and their emotional arcs, because
Yes.
speaking of his dad's party and stuff, I want to talk about his parents really, really bad. And I don't know if we want to get right to them or if you guys want to get to actual Miles, because we haven't talked to Miles, about Miles at all.
That was parents first.
But
Don't call them by their first names. They hate it.
Yeah. You learn to fall in love with that Miles' dad in the first one, immediately. But Rio in this movie, his mom, is one of my favorite characters of the movie as well. I spent 2 years living in Puerto Rico. I love that culture and just this party that they're hanging out in. I've been to parties like that down on the island, and I missed it so much. And it was very, speaking of the nostalgia thing, just sent me back to living back on that island and that like living with those people where family is so important. And like, not only is your real immediate family, like that's not your only family, your friends, your community, you're all family, and you all come together and you support each other.
I mean, if you take the Spider-Man and put him aside, I think Rio might be my favorite other character.
She was
in
so
this
good.
movie. There was so much to do with her and her relationship with Miles, and just the relationship of a mother, right? Having to watch their child grow up. And she's like, I'm just so used to you being my little boy. I'm not used to you, being the little man all the time now. And I'm just so used to taking care of you and you needing me all the time. And so just their dynamic throughout the whole movie, this one, and then even in the alternate universe where she's there and stuff. I love Rio's contribution to this movie and how she talks and how she understands Miles and she lets him go until then later she has to explain to her husband. She's like, yeah, well, I kind of ungrounded him, and just trust me, like you'll see in everything that happens. But little fun Easter egg for you that neither of us noticed until we watched YouTube with the little Easter eggs. How she's like, Hannah, be in Spanish. And she's like, Miles, mira, es
Puerto Rican
imposible.
flag jumps up.
Yeah, did you see it when it actually happened? See, I just saw the snap and I thought it was just like, a little South thing, but it was like the Puerto Rican flag. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so
Little touches
dope.
like that. It's like, and she also uses Spanglish in it. I can't
That's
remember.
so good.
I can't remember what phrase she uses, but that they use Spanglish all the time down there, So she calls out Miles for using Spanglish, and he does the same thing to her. But like, that's really how they talk in that culture. Like "que cool" is one of the like.
Que cool.
It's a very normal thing to say down there. Ah, que cool,
Que cool.
They used to always say down there, Puerto Rico is the best of both worlds, both the Latin culture and the American culture mixed into one island, and they're 100% right. They know how to party, but they got all the benefits of the U.S. It's freaking awesome. I really liked having Peter B. Parker back. I love seeing that he turned his life around, and I loved seeing that he followed through and had that kid. And it's a little bit heartbreaking that he wants that kid to connect so much with Miles. He's just like, I want you to hold the baby, please.
My baby.
It'll change everything. Just hold
You'll
the
know.
baby. And he's trying so hard to find that connection again with Miles when he knows he did something wrong and he's lying to him, but he's just trying everything he can to win Miles's trust back and to, win this trust of his almost adopted kid, this kid that he's like fallen in love with.
Yeah. And I don't know if we're going to talk about this later, but just that, those different aspects, especially of Peter B. Parker, kind of changing his own canon event in a way, but it not having his universe collapse in on himself. And I've seen some, a whole bunch of theories and things online of like, why his canon event changed, why Gwen Stacy's canon event could have changed.
Was his canon event the divorce?
Just his loss of her and not being able to have a family, but I think more powerfully, specifically Gwen Stacy's event of her father quitting rather than being a captain and being killed. He quits, and so she's able to avoid that canon event and not have, I don't know not an incursion. That's another multiverse, but how it's, those canon events are avoided, but there's not that collapse that happens.
I actually have like a little Twitter thread that I read a lot about kind of this idea behind not what's exactly going to happen in the third one, but kind of what's happening in this one and how we can look at it as its own story. And it's basically talking about how Miles Morales in this movie kind of proved to be the ultimate Spider-Man because he literally had thousands of Spider-Men chasing him, and he was able to beat and outwit them, right? And he's the one who's trying to change these, quote, canon events, right? And it's like, it's so weird because you think about the Spider-Man and like they're always, not always, but they're always, a lot of the times, like they're really good people and they're always trying to do the best. And this idea that some of these canon events, letting certain people die, all this stuff has to play out. It's an ethical crossroads. And so you think about it in that sense, and it's like, Spider-Man's always talking about that, and something that Miles says multiple times, Spider-Man always has a choice or can always do both or something like that. It seems really weird that all of a sudden a lot of these Spider-Men and everything have just come to this acceptance of these canon events have to occur. These people have to die and everything to keep our multiverse intact. And it makes sense because you look at it from Miguel's point of view. He tried to do the same. Tons of people died. And so he's just trying to do what he thinks has to be done. But at the same time, there's that part of you that says, what if though? What if we could really save more? What if we could do a ton? So this Twitter thread, I won't mention everyone. The original tweet, if you want to look it up, is by Poyos_Hernandi. And then there's a Twitter thread that goes underneath it. And people talk about this. They said, in this movie, because it says he's the ultimate Spider-Man when he beat all of the other Spider-Man in that chase. In this movie, he was the ultimate Spider-Man. He was the only one acting like a Spider-Man, which I actually have an issue with because a lot of the variants should have had his back. And then next person. I feel like Miguel purposely recruited spider people, and I'm not saying this is all true, this is just like people's point of view on Twitter, mind you. I feel like Miguel purposely recruited spider people who've already gone through so much that it was easier for them to accept the rules of the canon, with Pavtir being the youngest and most impressionable one. Not next thread, next person, not Hobie though. He had his own reasons to join the Aspire Society and quit when he saw everyone wanted to go after Miles. So it's really interesting to have like this society that was built by Miguel O'Hara and everything that's going along with it, and then kind of thinking about, yes, this is the Spider-Verse and the society that's been created to keep the canon and everything in line, but there are some unethical and just kind of things that don't ever sit right with you with it. Miles is going to have to fight it. He's going to have to fight his own alter self in Earth 42. And then Gwen is putting together her team to kind of fight back against the Spire Society in Beyond the Spider-Verse and get Miles back. There's just so much that kind of is going into this that I feel like I can see-ish the vague directions of the next movie, but I don't know where it's going, and I'm excited for that, if that makes sense. And I'm not trying to like push to like what's going to happen in the next one, but just the implications that this has on this trilogy and what the story is going is so beyond. Because I've seen some people say that they use animation and the beauty as a crutch, and like if it wasn't like such a beautifully animated movie, like that the story would fall flat. And I'm like, I just don't think that's true at all. I've seen people say that, and I'm just like, I think you're wrong, just straight up. Like, it has the plot, it has the music, it has the animation. Like, what else do you want? So sorry, I've talked a lot.
No, I can definitely see that, like Miguel doing that. He had the situation where he watched a whole world fall apart. You know, he's a compelling antagonist because he experienced that, and from his perspective, he wants to make sure that never happens again. I mean, he didn't just lose a whole universe; he lost his universe. He lost his family twice. You know, I can see him going and finding. I mean, you could see he was specifically did not want Miles around because he was this anomaly that he blamed. I can see him surrounding himself by more or less yes men that agree with him, that will help him further his cause, so this will never happen again. I think that's a very apt perspective of the movie.
And I think that's one of the biggest things is Miguel realized that he was the downfall of everything, because the reason why, his second universe collapsed is because everything he did was against, the canon of that universe, and he wasn't from that universe. At least as far as I've seen, the canon events being disrupted can only be caused by someone outside of your own universe. So for example, Miles, saving Captain Singh, the canon event was disrupted because he wasn't from that universe. But the fact that, Gwen was the reason that her father quit, that was her universe. So the canon event wasn't disrupted. But Peter B. Parker, he was able to change, not because Miles came in and gave some speech to Mary Jane, MJ, but it was because, he had talked to Peter B. Parker and he went and changed it himself. He changed his own story.
Yeah, I can see that playing very heavily into the next ones and how to stop the canon. Like if you go in and you put your finger inside someone else's canon, you're going to break it. But if you fix your own canon, then that's a cool.
Everyone reaching through spots, holes. And it's just so much that can connect. And just the multiverse and fixing your own canon and everything like that.
The multiversal bagel.
I have to say how cool it is, and I did not see it coming at all, the way that Miles gets his powers. That the Spider 42 is
that kind of first twist from this movie.
Yeah, that twist really got me and made it so much more interesting. One of the hardest things that I have with superheroes is when they create basically a clone of a superhero and just say, it's this, he's a different person, but he's got the exact same powers, So I have always had a hard time of being like, there's 2 Spider-Men in one universe. Like, how coincidental is that 2 radioactive spiders got created and 2 radioactive spiders bit people, and both those 2 people decided, it's just a little bit reachy for me, that concept. But the concept of, oh no, this spider wasn't even supposed to be in this universe. It crossed through, and this is the reason why there's 2 Spider-Verses. There's 2 Spider-Men in this universe. It wasn't because they made the mistake twice just so we could have 2 Spider-Men. Like, this tied into the entire overarching story, expanding story of just like this spider got pulled through, it bit someone that it wasn't supposed to, still found the same person that it probably would have found in that universe. But because it got pulled here, we had 2 Spider-Mans in this world, and now there are no Spider-Men in this other world. And it just sent this other world to hell, Freaking, it's like...
It's our world.
It's like Escape from New York in this one, It's burning. It's our world, exactly. And the consequences that it has on Miles himself, where this, I'd love to have seen what this other variant, what did you call him, Miles G.
Morales,
yeah.
I think is what
how he would have turned out.
Earth 42 Miles, yeah.
Yeah, how he would have turned out if he would have gotten bitten, like if he would have been on the straight and narrow after that, or if this inciting event, just it changed an entire universe. It's such a cool idea to tie it all in together. And that's what I love this most about this movie is it took this really perfect story and just found ways to tweak it without like it feeling like, what do you call it when I forgot the word when you change lore. I just forgot the term. Anyway, when comics do it a lot when you go in and retcon. They retconned a story, but I don't think that they retconned it. I think this was the plan from the get-go, I mean, just that spider itself, even in the first one, had the vibes of that world that they created in this other universe.
And it was like, it was glitching and everything just like, you do when you're out of your own universe. There's so much foreshadowing. There was also, when the number 42 showed up multiple times into the Spider-Verse. He slams into a sign, knocks down some stuff, and he's like surrounded by the number 42. His jersey is the number 42. Like, there's foreshadowing all over the place that this was,
This was the plan. And like you talked about, that it seems like they could have just been like, oh, look, this is it. But so much ends up making sense. A little bit from the first one, but definitely from the second one, when Miguel ends up dropping this truth bomb on him. Like, you weren't supposed to be Spider-Man. That's why Gwen's been so evasive. That's why she hasn't visited you. That's why everyone was so kind of questionable. That's why everyone came to you in the first place, in the first one, and stuff like that, because this wasn't supposed to happen. And you almost like question yourself for a second. Like, I love Miles, like, but if that wasn't supposed to happen, like, do we got to set the world right? He's not supposed to be Spider-Man and everything like that. And then, he beats all the Spider-Man in a chase. And we're like, Miles, let's go. You got this. That's my boy right there. And so there's just that's why, like I said, I feel like the animation does star and for me is the best part of this movie, but it doesn't fall short in the other areas that are important, especially plot-wise. Okay. Twist at the end, obviously, Miles. So they do the Silence of the Lambs thing, right? Where they show 2 places and they make you think it's simultaneous when Gwen Stacy shows up to his apartment and he shows up to his apartment with his mom there and everything like that. And then it reveals that it's actually 2 separate locations, in this case, 2 separate universes.
Before you go into it, at what point did you guys realize this wasn't Miles in Miles's universe?
So, go ahead first.
I didn't realize until they actually said it.
Like Uncle Aaron walks through, and you're just
he
says himself.
Because I started kind of being like, okay, Gwen's looking in this window, but we're not seeing Gwen in the window.
What's going on?
Odd. But then also like I got vibes. Something was off, but I didn't realize until like Gwen's like spider sense hit and his spider sense, and I was like. But that first like clue where she says, "Why'd you change? Like, what'd you do to your hair?" Mm-hmm. I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
So I guess like I didn't really like get the full they're in different universe until it was kind of a little bit later, like probably right before Miles said it. But my first time, and I think like they talked about the animation maybe should have, because even though it was raining.
It's different.
It's different.
So
it's this
different.
green and red, and the vibes are very different from Earth 1610, right? But my first clue was he gets to his apartment, he comes in the window, he goes to talk to Rio. Rio's eyes are green in this universe where they're brown in the other one. And it's not like a super crazy because it's kind of like a green brown almost. But I watched in the YouTube video we watched because I wanted to confirm. And the second time I watched, I looked to make sure because the first time I watched it, that was the first thing. She walks in, she's talking to him, and I was like, her eyes are different. Like, she looks different. This isn't the same. And so I wasn't just like immediately like, oh, I was just like, maybe I saw something wrong or whatnot and stuff like that. But that was like my first, so that was kind of, I guess, the moment that I was like, something's up. And then more and more stuff happened to be like, oh, something's happening. Yeah. Like, and even though this movie was long, I didn't feel like it was that long. I still kind of knew, I was like, we got to be getting kind of close to the end, but stuff isn't resolved. And I knew that the sequel was coming, but I didn't know it was going to be so cliffhangery. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, there's got to be stuff that's going to happen fast. Like, something's got to be going on. What about you?
I'm right there with you guys. I don't think I fully like went, oh, this is a different universe until the hair, she calls him out on the hair, where I was like, oh, of course. But I remember when he drops into that universe and it's raining, I remember like specifically thinking, whoa, this animation style is cool, you know? And I didn't put it together as like, oh, he's in a different universe. I was just like, oh, something looks different here. Like, this is pretty nice. This is pretty cool looking. I haven't seen this yet, you know? And I just kind of assumed it was nighttime in Miles's normal universe, and it's reflecting the raining that's going on in Gwen's world. So I'm just like, oh, and it's dark, and we're ending on this like dramatic sad note, you know. So I'm just like, oh, it's just they're doing the different animation here because of thematic reasons, not universal reasons. And I felt so stupid that I didn't put that together until the hair moment, where I was just like, I knew something was going on here, you know. It was such an effective twist. That twist right there of just like the world hinting towards it was more effective to me than the reveal of Miles being the other Prowler. Once I knew Miles was in the other universe, I immediately knew, okay, Miles is the other Prowler. It took me like a little bit to be like, oh, Miles is here. Oh shoot, like something's going on, but I didn't know like he's gonna be the Prowler until like a little bit later for me. But also one of the biggest hints wasn't even like tiny; it was huge. When he scans his DNA, there is a screen that's almost the full screen that says Earth 42. Oh, really?
Like right there. No, it's on the screen for like a second.
Shoots him out, and we're like, I didn't see it, but like the second time I watched it, I was like
Earth _ 0042. Like it's just there on the screen, and then it cuts away to because it's an intense scene, so you're just like, oh, he scanned it and it got the thing, whatever, blah 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 blah. But it was just like straight up just right Earth 42 on the screen. Oh, cool. There's so many little hints that they do, and one of the things that I noticed on my second rewatch, this wasn't like from a YouTube video or anything, I noticed it, was when he's in there and he's talking with his mom on the scenes where you can see Miles and it has the window in the background. On the side, his room's kind of a little bit messier in Earth 42. There's a thing pinned up to his desk that's like a blueprint, like the actual blueprint, right, with the blue and the white chalk and whatnot of, it's like small, but it's like of the Prowler gloves and stuff like that. So there's just and I'm sure there's so much more that we haven't even noticed that they just drop little things here and there to be like, you're so stupid. You should have noticed. All the way to get there.
There's one frame there that I have to call out to because it's so cool. It's one of my favorite frames. Like it's one of those moments where in my mind, like that's going to be in my head forever when Uncle Aaron punches the punching bag.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just like
Scott.
Explosion.
I straight up, I went like, in the theater, I was like,
he's dead.
Cause it's that explosion out the back of the frame. And it's like, you know, it's the color and everything of, you know, the comic being like basically shattered. And you're like, he just murked
I thought this was PG.
I was like, yo, he dead. And then, you know, swing around and he's there and you're just like, oh,
yeah,
scary,
effective, visually pleasing. Like what an introduction to this new version of this world. Like, it's great. It's a great cliffhanger.
But also the callback, you know, that they kind of do at the end there with, you know, with Miles being tied up to the punching bag back to into the Spider-Verse of Peter B. Parker, when Miles ties him up to the punching bag and he's like, you know, asking him all this stuff. And, you know, we kind of got the hint where, you know, he like rubs his finger and it's like a little shock. There's, you know, there's that scene where Peter B. Parker just drops out of the chains and he's like, you know, watch the hands or whatever, where he just is able to release himself. And I think, that kind of gives us a little bit of a notion of like how he could potentially escape.
Is calling back to the first one.
Is a callback to that first one where he's tied to that punching bag.
We're piecing it together.
What does Peter keep saying? He's like, I am a pretty good mentor. I did teach him that.
Yeah.
Well, there was like so many moments.
Stuff.
One of the ones that we saw was the moment where, because Peter's asking different people Peter B. Parker's asking people during the chase about like being a good mentor or not and everything like that. And then he takes everyone up into the sky and then he falls down and jumps away to escape. And it's also a callback to the first one when Peter B. Parker did something similar to also like escape. I don't remember the exact.
Well, it's partially just his drop into the particle reactor.
Oh yes,
as well as I think the big one that he's mentioning there is when he turns invisible.
Yes.
On his drop, because he drops and he turns invisible, and he's like, I taught him how to do that because like he was like the mentor and the whole thing, and like teaching him. Honestly, probably is one of his most powerful skills.
Oh, being invisible. What the heck?
Because like his
comes into play so many times.
His venom blast and everything was super awesome, but like turning invisible is top tier.
That's the next level,
skill.
and that's
something
like
that someone like Spider-Man can use in so many situations.
Oh yeah,
and it's not something that's like normal among Spider-Man. Usually, it's definitely something very not like unique to just him, but like very unique for Miles Morales, this version of Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So super interesting. I hate to like go back because I hate backtracking, but when you guys were talking about that, I thought about something else I had wanted to mention, but never ended up writing down. When we talk about technical animation styles and stuff like that, one of the best parts from the first movie is when he, does that jump and he's upside down in the night version and what's up, Dange, and there's that moment where he breaks away from the glass that people talk about. There were multiple moments in multiple universes where you see that same type of thing in their own styles in this movie.
I noticed one of them.
There was, I'm trying to remember all of them.
I think one was on that train that you're talking about.
Yeah. And there's different things like that. But there's just so many little moments where that exact thing happens and they don't make a big deal out of it, but it's just there. And it's just another technical little thing. That's just great.
I'm going to make you do it. I know you said earlier
No.
you don't want to. You got to choose the first one or this one.
I mean,
which one do you like better?
I'm
going to make you do it.
The movie's been out for not even 2 weeks, so recency bias is a thing. I'm going to say this one. I just think that they gave them the creative freedom to take that first one and take everything that made it good to the next level, and I think they killed it. I'm going to say Across the Spider-Verse.
I also am going to say Across the Spider-Verse. Maybe I need to go watch Into the Spider-Verse again and just be re-wowed, but yeah, no. I mean, it sets it up beautifully. It takes everything that it had and just amplifies it to another level.
And I love a good cliffhanger. Like, so many people are complaining. They're like, they should have been more clear and let us know and stuff. And it's like, when's the last time you had a really good, like, cliffhanger? I feel like Infinity War was pretty good. Like, and people liked that. And then the payoff that was eventually Endgame, ended up being one of the best MCU movies. And you don't really get a lot of those these days. And so that cliffhanger and getting us so pumped for more Spider-Verse, hopefully next year. I've seen some kind of questionable details about whether that'll actually...
It's scheduled for like August, right?
It's scheduled for March.
Even
May,
sooner.
May, I think.
I think it's March.
May?
It's scheduled for March of next year, but I've heard questionable stuff. A lot of the cast, they could just be throwing people off purposely, but a lot of the cast has said they haven't done hardly any voice work for stuff. Here's the thing. I feel like they had to have done, because these movies releasing so close to each other, so much of it has to already be animated, number one. So I feel like a lot of the voice work maybe also already has to have had happen, and they just have to kind of be quiet about it or something. I don't know. I'm hoping that March dates hit, but a lot of people are talking about how it might not. And even though that would bum me out severely, because I want the finale and I want it to be as good as these other ones have been, if they need more time,
take it.
You took 5 years to... If this is what we get... If you need 5 years, yeah, that's going to be a painful 5 years. But if it pays off like this one did, take 10.
Yeah.
Do what you need. Like,
100%.
I will be there on opening night in IMAX to see it.
Yep.
That's also my one, not critique, but like sad part when I watched the movie the second time, because I ended up not seeing it IMAX because it was out of theaters. And so I just went to one a little bit closer to me that didn't have any IMAX screenings and saw it in a regular one. It was good, but I definitely could notice the difference. And it just kind of made me sad. I was like,
I know.
I'll never see this in IMAX again.
I
Probably.
literally did the exact same thing.
Dang it!
Saw it in IMAX first time, and then I saw it again a couple nights ago, and the sound just wasn't as strong, and it's just not the same experience. It's still a great movie, but it's not the same experience as seeing something in IMAX. I am shill for IMAX now. I cannot. There's no better way to see a movie.
You have to. You have to. If I moved even further away, the movie theater close to us here, if I was like an hour away, I would do it.
Yeah.
I would drive for Oppenheimer, for whatever.
Whatever's playing there.
Exactly.
Transformers.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna say there's no wrong answer here.
Oh.
But I think I prefer the first one. I think I'm still an Into the Spider-Man fan. I just can't believe how perfect that movie is. Like, I agree with everything you guys are saying. This across expanded on something that was perfect in a way that I did not think was
possible,
able to top, and I did not see them topping it in this way. And it's the animation, just like one-ups. We've spent an hour and a half talking about how incredible it looks. But I do love the fact that the first one is such a perfectly efficient, contained story that has a beginning and an end, and everything is just so perfectly satisfying. It's funny. It looks amazing. It's a perfect experience contained in itself, It's the first experience with this type of movie.
Alone.
Can stand by itself. Yeah. I loved all the characters, and I think if I'm going to go back and rewatch these movies, that's going to be the one that I'm going to rewatch over and over again. Second one I absolutely loved. It's awesome what they did with it. The first one's going to be one I rewatch over and over again. And it's got more Peter B. Parker in it.
There you go. Perfect. Any final thoughts, Scott?
I just love Spider-Man. In case you couldn't tell, big Spider-Man fan. So I've been super psyched for this movie to come out for a while. Just get more, into all of the different, Spider-Man comics and, just random references and, even just like getting a tiny little, spider plush thrown at his head, just, funny little things like that. Just
I'm the guy you hit me with a bagel.
Yeah, just hitting him with a bagel,
The T-whip from the T-Rex.
Bro, just
all of the little...
The tiny little jokes.
Details.
I know we already mentioned it, but like I definitely am going to go back through and pause, as they were going through all of the jokes about Spot, as they just first came to the Spider Society. Just so many tiny little jokes and funny things and just,
so clever.
Great things. Yeah.
Well, like jokes they just brought back during it. Like Miles talking to Spot, being like, why are you calling it ATM machine? The M stands for machine. And then later on when he's in Bat and he's like, chai tea? Why are you calling it chai tea? You're calling it TT. Like, just, sorry. There's too much there's too much to talk about in this movie. Vince, anything?
No, I got nothing.
You got your stuff?
I got it all out.
Across the Spider-Verse is definitely what we needed for the Spider-Verse and for animation movies in general. Into the Spider-Verse already pushed this type. It brought this type of animation, this style of movie into the spotlight, and Across the Spider-Verse took it to the next level, and other films are trying to follow suit. Obviously, like we talked about in our Fast Forward episode, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem is coming out later this summer in August. And while there's a lot of differences, it kind of follows this style of being kind of the old animation has its own things, very comic booky, very self-aware of what it's doing with its animation, not trying to be hyper-realistic or anything like that, just making what makes the movie good. And other movies are following suit, and I'm just a huge fan of it. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is going to be one of the best. I think there's no way this movie doesn't end up in my top 3 for the year.
It's an Oscar now?
Oscar, I think it wins animated feature film. Easy. Good. Anything else? Questionable, because you know how it can be sometimes. But I think if there's a movie to do it, the first one I don't think got recognized for anything other than best feature film. It won, I believe, but I don't think it got any other nominations for anything else. Who knows though? There's stuff that could happen as we get into the end of the year.
Things that going against it. Spider-Man movie, animated movie.
The things that the
Oscars.
Academy hates.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll see what happens once we get to that season. I am excited to see how it shakes out. If there does end up being any kind of push for something like that, I'll love it. I'll support it. I'll be behind it. And like I said, once we get to the end of the year, so far this year, because I kind of keep my list on Letterboxd. I keep it on private so no one can see, but I'm updating it through the year now. As I watch a movie, I kind of put it on my list to rank it, and then when we get to the end of the year for our top 10 episodes, movies of the year. No spoilers on the rest of my list, but this one's a number one right now. It's the best movie that's come out this year, in my opinion. Is there anything that you think would be better?
I think I'm right there with you.
There's just,
I can't think of anything else.
like, Guardians is good. I like it, and it's definitely up there, and there's some other things that are up there. But this, I think, is my first 5-star, and not even questionable. It's my first 5-star movie of the year on Letterboxd. So we'll see if any of the other summer movies can top it. We'll see if any Oscar movies that come out later this year can top it.
Transformers does.
There's too much going on. Thanks so much again for tuning into this episode of the Pause Rewind Play podcast. If you did enjoy, we would really appreciate if you could hit the like button, subscribe, because we love talking about this and we love talking about it with you. Leave a comment down below to let us know if you like this one better or the original, or if there's anything that you'd like us to watch, because we love taking requests from the audience. Thanks again for tuning in. I will catch you next time.